Hi, everyone. Welcome to Forbes Talks. I'm Diane Brady, Assistant Managing Editor here, and I'm with Matt Craig, my colleague, who is Assistant Editor covering sports money. Matt, the World Cup in Qatar, the figures are staggering.
Yeah, it's an incredible amount of money. Estimated to be around $220 billion. That's 15 times what Russia was said to have spent on the 2018 World Cup. And even though that number has never been officially confirmed, Qatar's Minister of Finance is saying that the country spent about $500 million per week on development projects in the lead up to the event. Things like roads, hotels, the airport needed to be expanded. So all things, not necessarily all on stadiums and things like that, but just an incredible amount of money that the country has poured into this event.
And, some of the other money figures are pretty staggering as well. If you look at, let's take FIFA, which is not a body that as many Americans are familiar with, the governing body, of course, of football, we call it, or soccer, we call it here. How much money do they stand to gain from the World Cup, which lasts roughly, a month, basically?
Yeah, it lasts 29 days exactly. They do cover some of the costs of the event, so things like the television production and hospitality and things like that. But that only amounts to about $1.7 billion, and the TV rights alone account for $2.64 billion in revenue. FIFA overall is going to take in about $4.7 billion for this World Cup. So a huge money making event for FIFA, perhaps less so for Qatar, although that's much harder to estimate.
The evolution of the sport, when you look at the most valuable franchises in the world, I know Manchester United often comes up. I mean, with soccer itself, or football, forgive me, give us some sense of just the money involved in the sport. Who are the highest paid, players, the teams?
Yeah. So the highest paid player playing in this year's World Cup is Kylian Mbappe from France, France being the defending World Cup champions. And he is going to be making about $110 million just from Paris Saint-Germain, which is his club. He's making about another $11 million off the field from things like endorsements. So yeah, the players' salaries have gone crazy, and a lot of that is because of investment from billionaires and also wealthy nation states like Qatar, which owns a couple of clubs, and Saudi Arabia's wealth fund, which also owns clubs. So the investment of that same money is what's shooting up both the club values and player earnings across the globe.
Any estimates? I always I remember I think the last game in the World Cup was like 1.1 billion watched the final of the previous World Cup. How many people are estimated to be tuning in?
Yeah, I always wonder how they judge these things
Half the
because
planet.
Nielsen ratings may not be as accurate across the world, but they're estimating 5 billion people will watch some World Cup coverage across the month. So over half of the world's population. And another incredible stat that I saw was they're estimating $160 billion to be wagered on the World Cup, which is an incredible amount of money. It comes to about $1 billion per match being wagered on each World Cup match. So not only are people tuning in, but they're also invested in the action across the world.
If anyone's betting on the U.S. team, do you have any sort of sense as to how are the odds for the teams this year? Who's favored to win?
Yeah, the United States team would be considered a big value bet. $100 bet on the United States to win the World Cup would net you about $13,000 if they were to win it. And just to win their group, which would mean that they need to come in first out of England, Wales, and Iran, just to win their group would be 5-1 odds. So the United States not considered to be one of the favorites. The betting favorite and kind of the sharps pick is Brazil, who is not only very talented but also looked very good in the lead up to the World Cup.
Do you have some sense of how this sport has grown? I mean, I know you cover it often from the money aspect with regard to, investments, gambling, endorsements, et cetera. But we've seen a massive increase in investment this time around. Are we also seeing a massive increase in the appetite for football just the audiences. I mean, 5 billion's a figure I haven't heard before.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's hard to calculate these things because of the pandemic, which brought money out of the sport, and a lot of times the values of the teams went down over the last couple of years. So there's not exactly straight lines to be drawn, but from looking at, like, for example, the FIFA budgets and budget projections for the next World Cup cycle, there certainly are growing. The TV rights are up significantly. I think it was up 20% from the last one, and they're going to expire here before the next World Cup. Will be up again. The team values, the average team club values were up 7% from last year. Real Madrid, now most valuable team in the world, is worth $5.1 billion. That would be more valuable than every United States sports team except for teams in the NFL. So these clubs now have a worldwide blueprint or footprint, excuse me, and a worldwide brand in a way that they didn't maybe 5 years ago. And another thing to look forward to is the next World Cup in 2026 is being hosted in the United States, and that will only bring the world stage to our front doorstep and give the soccer world an even a more, I would say, mainstream media focus here in the United States.
I feel like we should touch on some of the controversies here, because I know the money and the business continues apace, but yet there have been a lot of discussions around, Qatar as a base for this. What exactly, have been the main issues?
Yeah, so there are many to list, but the most significant one in my mind is around workers' deaths and specifically migrant workers. It's incredible to think that about 90%, 85 to 90% of Qatar's residents on any given day are migrant workers. There's a little under 3 million people that are residents of Qatar and only about 300,000 Qatari citizens. The rest are migrant workers. And when you think about, again, a $220 billion development project over the last 12 years, you can imagine how much need there was for these workers. Back in 2010, when Qatar was awarded the World Cup, the country didn't have a minimum wage, for example, and they still had a system known as kafala, which meant that workers' visas were sponsored by the employer, who then almost has complete control over that person to confiscate their passport, not allow letters of resignation, not allow exit visas to leave the country. It was called modern day slavery. And even as pressure on the country has formally made them go away from kafalas as a formal practice, a lot of human rights groups are still saying that the symptoms are still there. We don't really know how many workers died. The Guardian estimates like 6,500 migrant workers from 5 Southeast Asian countries have died since 2010. And actually, Qatar doesn't dispute that number. They just dispute that those deaths came as a result of World Cup construction. They admit to only 40 deaths on construction projects, and only 3 of those being work-related. But there's been calls from human rights groups now that FIFA and Qatar should raise a $440 million fund equal to the total prize pool that the teams will be playing for in the World Cup to pay migrant workers' families in things like wrongful deaths and compensation for this incredible construction project that's gone over the last 12 years.
Well, and it's interesting. Has the spotlight of FIFA and the World Cup, has that actually prompted some of these, whether it's legislative changes or, frankly, the world's eyes are on you? It would make sense that practices that don't look so good in 2022, you'd have to change.
It has, formally, anyways. The attention and the pressure from human rights groups and really the world, the media in general, has led to some formal changes. The question is, one, is that actually affecting people's lives? And 2, what will happen once, the carnival moves on to the next country in the next World Cup cycle? Will this progress continue in the country? I don't know the answer to that. I think the social controversies of the country certainly will not change, because even amongst the pressure, things like homosexual rights, women's rights, they still operate in a male guardian system. For example, women have to get permission from a father, a brother, a husband to do basic tasks, marrying, getting a lot of reproductive health care rights, working a government job, things like that. So I don't think that the social progress is uh, completely solved, let's say, now that the World Cup has officially kicked off.
Well, it's interesting. You hear a lot of people complaining about the lack of alcohol in the stadiums. That seems to have really, captured the imagination of football fans worldwide. Have you done any research at all on FIFA itself? Because that is an organization, as I said, the governing body of football and soccer as we know it here in the U.S. But if you look at past World Cups, they have been in locations that, are maybe not equally controversial, but certainly controversial.
Yeah, no doubt. It's important to remember that Qatar is 20% smaller than the state of Connecticut. I mean, it's an incredibly small country. If you imagine, 8 Olympic-sized stadiums in the state of Connecticut, you can imagine just how crowded it is over there right now. It's crazy. But from a social standpoint, yes, the last 2 World Cups have been in Vladimir Putin's Russia, and then now in Qatar. There's been many, like dozens and dozens of accusations of bribery for FIFA to award those World Cups to those 2 countries. FIFA did an internal investigation and said that there was no impropriety, but including, the United States Department of Justice, there have been allegations of those things, and they just have not officially been able to be confirmed. But it does make you wonder. The old FIFA president, Sepp Blatter, said in the lead up to this World Cup that awarding it to Qatar was a mistake, that it's too small of a country for this large of an event. And that makes you wonder maybe why they were chosen, especially because the United States was a heavy favorite to host the 2022 World Cup. And then at the last minute, kind of for no reason, or at least under mysterious circumstances, Qatar was chosen to host it this year.
Any other thoughts? You mentioned the prize money. Has that been going up as well? So the winning team, winning franchise, how much will they get if they carry home number 1?
Yeah, so the World Cup prize pool is up 40 million from last World Cup, where it was 400. Now it's 440. The world champions will take home $42 million. So not a bad little chunk of change. That number has gone up. A lot of that has been a negotiation from the players, in addition to, of course, media rights exploding in recent years, players asking for more. The interesting thing, though, is the winning prize will be awarded to the federation of that country. And then that country can decide for itself how much the players get of that. So, for example, like last World Cup cycle, the players were only getting, France won the World Cup, and I think the players got between $100,000 and $200,000 bonuses, which of course is nice, but if the country is taking home around $40 million, it's certainly less than you might expect.
Well, lots of drama to come, and not just on the field. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Of course, appreciate it.